approach best. I'm going to introduce you to Max and Damon from Aardvark, which is now interestingly known as Google. Take it away. I'm going to give him this mic.
Great. Thanks a lot, Eric. We're thrilled to be here. In addition to being a really inspiring and challenging advisor for us, Eric has given us this chance to share some thoughts with a huge audience of entrepreneurs, which is kind of the favorite audience for us because entrepreneurs are strange creatures, and it's seldom that we're around like-minded folks. So what we're going to do today is we want to share really some lessons about building a startup. But since we're startup guys, we can't resist the chance to also shill our product. Even though our product now exists within Google, it turns out to be a great place to get a product out to hundreds of millions of people really quickly. We still want to talk about the product, as Aardvark. So the product is interesting. We ended the last session talking about kindness because our product is actually a goodwill engine, but it's masquerading as a social search engine. So let me talk a little bit about what a social search engine is, and then we get into how we built a company to build a social search engine. So the opportunity we saw is this. Web search has been around now for well over a decade, but especially in the last decade, it's been an extremely powerful force in our lives. And it turns out to be terrific for a certain class of questions, especially objective questions. You can think about reference questions that you have, navigational queries, this type of thing. What is Einstein's birthday turned out to be our favorite example reference question when we were going around pitching this idea. There are gazillions of others, but that's our favorite. Now, if of the dimensions that you can slice queries on, the other end of the dimension might be fully subjective questions. That is, questions where there's not one single right answer, but where the answer depends upon your personal context, your beliefs, what you're interested in. So here we say, what's a good book to read about the Romantic poets? There are a lot of good books. There are a lot of Romantic poets. And what you want is for somebody to understand where you're coming from, to get an answer that's suited to your needs. Now, what we noticed when looking at search queries over time was that search engines are doing worse and worse at answering these subjective questions. So when you do search reviews where you have raters come in and look at how well the results page is for the query, reviewers are happiest when their queries are objective and least happy when the queries are subjective. Now, we also noticed that that correlated with, except inversely correlated with, where search revenues come from. The types of queries that search engines make a lot of money off of are the subjective questions. Those are questions about how you want to spend your time and money. So when we looked at the slide, this slide to us screams opportunity. Because we put it together to scream that to investors, and it screamed some other things too, but that's why you pitch a lot of investors, not just one. So the opportunity here was, how can you build something that would help with subjective questions? Now, the obvious way to get a subjective question answered is to ask a friend, to ask somebody that you trust, somebody in your network. But there are actually some problems with that. One problem is that there are only a small number of friends who are actually available to you at a given moment. You have maybe the small number of people on your buddy list that you might IM just out of the blue and ask them, hey, can you help me out with what I'm looking for? I know you know a lot about Romantic poets. So there's a small number of people, but then worse, if you look further out into friends of friends and so forth, you actually don't know all that much about these people. Suppose that you want to learn how to become an expert ping pong player. Well, the fact is, there's somebody out there who's a friend of a friend, if you have tens of thousands of friends, who probably knows quite a bit about ping pong, but you might not know that about them because you met them once at a party and you were drunk at the time. And they went on and talked about it. So it's hard to keep up with all your friends. And then further, if you do know of somebody, well, there's a social cost of leaning on them. You have to start up a conversation with them and so forth. You have to catch up on what's been going on, and then you feel you owe them one in response. So even though friends are a good answer for subjective questions, there's a role here for technology to come in and take what's a very natural interaction, that is asking somebody for help, and scale it. So the product we built with Aardvark, eventually, was this. You send Aardvark in a question. So here the question is, hey, what's a good biking path around Golden Gate Park? And Aardvark acts like that contact, that friend who's the hub, who always knows the right person to ask, the person who can always direct you in the right direction. So you send in the question to Aardvark. Aardvark figures out what it's about and then checks through your extended social network to see who might be online right now and know about that subject and interested in answering. Then Aardvark will send your question to one or two of those people, give them a chance to answer or to kind of just pass on the question and quietly kind of slink away. And if they do answer, Aardvark will send their response on to you, and you can have a live chat with somebody. So the interaction is very much like asking somebody directly on your buddy list a question, having a little chat, except for you have the resources of a huge network of people. That's where the technology comes in. So again, to revisit the main reasons why we built this product, one is for subjective questions, users really want personalized responses to their question. Every question is unique. Every time you have an urge to do something, your particular context flavors that a little bit. It's very valuable to have somebody hear your question and respond right at the moment. You get the sense that they know exactly what you're looking for. In addition, a lot of the answers that we want are often things that are locked inside people's heads. If you think about, in your own case, everything that you know, everything that you've ever experienced, and how little of that you've published online. Think about your hometown or where you went to school or your feelings about your relationships or whatever it might be. It's only a fraction you've put online, but some other elements of that experience are going to be helpful to lots of other people. But it's locked inside your head. Aardvark's role is to kind of tap that out of your head. Now, what made this possible from a technology point of view is that when we started a few years ago, we noticed with social networks growing exponentially, if the average person has about 200 friends on a social network, that's 40,000 friends of friends directly, even before you include school affiliations and work affiliations. That's an enormous number of people. It's a huge brain trust that you could call upon if you had a mechanism for doing it. Now, one of the reasons we call it a goodwill engine is because the way that this works is by people wanting to answer your question. That was the crucial linchpin. And what enables that is the sense of social intimacy. If it's a friend of a friend reaching out, I'm Damon, and you're my friends, and so if somebody comes to you and says, hey, a friend of Damon has a question about what you're an expert in, and takes you a minute to type a reply, it feels really satisfying. So it's that intimacy between us that causes somebody to write an answer, and then when you receive an answer through this type of system, it feels very actionable because somebody's responded to your need. It's a very directed answer. Then lastly, the reason we think this is a business is because these questions are about how you want to spend your time and money. They're the things that you care about, and so it's highly lucrative. Anyway, so that's the product that we built, and Max will tell you a bit about how we built it.
So let me see. I think that works. All right. So obviously, once you're at the end of a startup and you've actually sold your startup, it feels very much fated. Like, that was the right idea. So glad we did that. We did it exactly the right way. I don't think we felt that even in the moment when we were actually selling the company, that we'd figured it out and it was working. And if we sort of go back to the beginning, we actually had exactly the opposite approach, which was that we're going to be doing this for a long time. This graph's a little outdated. It shows the average, or rather the median number of years after a VC financing until an exit to be 7 years. That was in 2008. It's now up to about 9 years. So you're going to be doing this for a while, and you're probably going to fail. And this is my favorite quote from Mike Cassidy. In a startup, the chance of anything good is always under 50%. So when you say to yourself, this is definitely going to work, I'm 100% sure, you're a coin flip, which is great. That's amazing that you're a coin flip from doing something good, but you're never going to do better than that. And so you internalize that, which is that I'm probably going to fail in everything that I do that I want to succeed. So how can I, A, increase my chances of success, but more importantly, use that failure and make it less painful for me when I fail. And the goal then is to minimize the risk of the catastrophic fail, that final pivot when you've run out of money and you actually have to change jobs. And the way that we did that, and the way that I think is the only way to do that, is to maximize trials and to be patient. And it's taking a very evolutionary approach to this. It's saying, I'm not going to be able to jump from 0 to perfection. I'm going to be able to do it in small chunks, but if I'm usually wrong, I have to try out a bunch of different things and then see what works, build on that, build on that, build on that, and move on. And my favorite analogy here is actually not the startup, which has the 9-year lifespan, because most people are delusional about that. They think, oh, well, yeah, that's the median, but not for me. I'm going to succeed in 3 months. It's the Olympic athlete. and sort of to think yourself, if you were trying to win an Olympic medal in something and you were dedicating yourself to that, how long would it take? How strategic would you be in choosing what event to do? You know, if you play pickup basketball on the weekend, that might not be the best reason to go after that Olympic gold medal in basketball. And sort of what's your approach to do it? It's incremental. It's really taking advantage of sort of coaches and teammates and assuming that it's going to take a while and be really unlikely for you to succeed. So to go through sort of how we actually progress from A to B to C, we spent half a year just on product conception, which is easy to gloss over, but I challenge people to take 6 months to not adopt an idea and actually force yourself to do the opposite, to say, I will not pick an idea until 6 months have passed, no matter how promising I think it's going to be. And when I'm sure that idea is right, by the way, it's only a 50% chance it's going to succeed, then I'm going to sort of prove that to myself and prove it to everyone else, because I have these 6 months, I might as well. And what we found is that those ideas that we were pretty certain of were disasters. We actually forced ourselves to face the reality. And as we prototyped in serial and abandoned one thing after the next, and there's sort of a fun slide after this, that didn't mean we were jumping all over the place. We were within one specific space that we felt informed about, that we had certain trends that we felt were enabling us, and that was this sort of broader search space of how people make and carry out decisions using tools that are available newly online. So these are, just for nostalgic purposes, the 5 ideas that didn't make it, that because we were forcing ourselves to not pick an idea for 6 months, we actually faced reality about and moved from things that were interesting but not ultimately compelling to users. And we knew that because we'd prototype something, we'd put it in the hands of someone, we'd invite 100, 200 people, and we'd see 3 of them tried it out and none of them came back. And, you know, when you actually force yourself to do that, most of the time the signal is run. Do not do this. Do something else. This is a rat hole. But you feel incredibly excited about at least the first and the second and the third. By the 4th and the 5th, it felt pretty terrible, you know, killing baby after baby. But ultimately, it let you get to that 6th idea, which most people will say, you know, you need 6 ideas. It's the 6th idea that'll work. Well, it's sure great to get rid of the first 5 as quickly and as painlessly as possible. And one of the ways that we would do that is we would fake things. We would stay away from things that had a high visual component or a critical low latency component, things that were enterprise. We would pick ideas that we could prototype and get a reasonable signal from users in very early raw form. And we would have human beings fill in the gaps. So a good analogy here is, imagine I say to you, you tell me 3 of your favorite movies and I'll give you a great recommendation for what movie you should see that's out right now. If that's visually slick, fantastic. If I can tell you in a millisecond, great. But if it takes an hour for a human being on the back end to come up with a recommendation using some process, I can still see whether or not that's valuable to people, whether or not they'll come back. I can still pitch that in an AdWord even if nothing's been built. And you know, this was the desk of one of the people pretending to be products. You know, and it's hard to see, but they have like a chat program open, and that's where they would pretend to be Aardvark in the very earliest days. And so then we sort of get to the point where we say, wow, people like this Aardvark thing in this super crappy form. This is worth building because they'll only like it more. That's still delusional, but at least it's sort of promising. It's like maybe there'll be close to a 50% chance. And then I think the thing that we did that was novel was we didn't just jump right in. We didn't go into a garage. We actually kept running Aardvark as a Wizard of Oz experiment for 9 months. 9 months with human beings on the back end being involved at every single question that someone asked. Not answering, but classifying the query, managing the conversation, you know, doing the kinds of things that eventually we would try and do in an automated fashion. But along the way, we learned how would people actually use this product. You know, what are the things that they would need us to build in that we would think are totally ancillary, like the ability to carry on multiple conversations with Aardvark at once, but that were absolutely fundamental, where every single person that kept coming back to the product did that. And during that phase, when there was a human being involved in every single Aardvark interaction,